I see why I was getting a phone call here. Sorry. Um, so I want to greet everybody. This came on a little late because I made a mistake here. I want to greet everybody and thank everybody for supporting the show. You're a real family. For people who really like uh, this show, hit the like button. For new people, hit the red button, which is the subscribers button. And I see what's also happened here. You didn't get the introduction, but that will just have to go its way. So I particularly want to thank the people who provided financial support last week, Sister Robin Hughes and Siobhan Benuo and others, you know. So I want to thank you. And there was another donation that didn't come in that I can't find, but I know there were 3 donations last show. And what I was trying to do, explaining last week, was to stress that I need some viewer donations on a consistent basis because this show has cost me over $50,000 over the 4 years that we've been on. And so hopefully we can get enough donations where I can cover the cost of the show monthly, which is about $500 a month. And that's minus everything else, you know. So this show is entitled Trump's Elimination of DEI Attempts to Return to Jim Crow. And so this is going to be focusing on what historical time are we in right now, looking carefully at right now one particular measure that is being taken to advance the Trump agenda or the MAGA agenda. What does it represent? It's also going to be looking at what's the state of this country in relationship to the world in the context of this time of MAGA. And it's going to be looking at the forces that we're going up against and what do they think they're going to get out of this period and what are they really going to get in all likelihood. It's going to look at briefly how what Trump is doing right now is a continuation of his first term, except much better organized, and particularly of Project 2025, which some people said, oh, really? You think he's going to do it? And then we're going to look at what this move by Trump to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion, or what has formerly been called affirmative action, what it means, and how can we resist it. And overall, this is an opening just for us to begin the process of rebuilding our power in our families and communities and organizations. So the first thing I want to do is make it clear that this is a hard period to go through, and it's going to be particularly hard for people who are in bad circumstances economically, because the thrust of what MAGA is getting ready to do and is doing is going to be particularly aimed at the poor and the working class, and further eroding what's left of the middle class. So for anyone whose financial circumstances are not solid, this is going to be particularly hurtful. But in many cases, for those who think they are, they will be too, given the moves that are being made. So overall, what I want to do is, first of all, put what's going on now within the context of this historical period. And I'm doing that because it's important for us to really understand power and how power works. I know a lot of us like pretty definitions. Huey Newton's definition about power is the ability to define phenomena and to get it to act accordingly. That sounds pretty. I've never operated on a definition of power because it's always been a question of strategy, which is long-term objectives, and tactics, how you get there. And so when you're looking at the exercise of power, you got to distinguish when you have victories, what kind of victory is it? Is it a strategic victory, an overall victory? Is it a tactical victory? A step in achieving your overall objectives? Have you been victorious in that? And a lot of people are making the mistake of concluding that the setbacks in this election of MAGA or Trump is strategic. That I've heard people, because one of the things I get on people on is using this term white supremacy. It fit what happened before. But the West is in decline and has fallen as a global power center, and the United States is in decline. And that's one thing Trump got right, but he got it right for the wrong reasons. Because his was all about the conspiracies to do him in and, a whole bunch of stuff. But you got to make a distinction between victories that are strategic, that are long-term, that enable you to achieve overall objectives, and tactical that are short-term, that enable you to achieve short-term objectives. And in this, so the question is, what term should you use then? Declining white supremacy, white savagery or barbarism, because that term was never appropriate. That's a white boy's term, white supremacy. And then you get paralyzed with that. Suppose Muhammad Ali went into the ring and, assumed with Sonny Liston that he was dealing with black supremacy, because Liston had one of the baddest punches gone. And Muhammad Ali said after the fight, years later, he was scared to death. Sonny Liston, on the other hand, had made a big mistake in underestimating this guy. Sonny Liston had one of the baddest punches going. Muhammad Ali didn't. He was not a knockout specialist. In fact, he didn't throw blows to the body. He threw them to the face. And he had a jab so fast you couldn't see it. You had to put it in slow motion. And he had a good punch. And he did knock some opponents out, but he was not a knockout specialist. But he wasn't, even though he was afraid of Sonny Liston, you'd never know it. He was selling wolf tickets all the way to victory. And I'll say this, one of the strategies of MAGA right now, that is the Trump administration, is to scare you to death. So they're calling what they're doing now shock and awe. That's named after the Bush administration's move in Iraq. Well, if you had any sense, you would know that if these forces got in power, it wasn't going to be like the last time, fumbling and mumbling, 2017. Didn't know what they were doing, This time it's well-oiled. So you should know that. But to be afraid, I'm going to tell you something, while people will say that fear is natural and everything else. No, it's not. Babies are not born with fear. Fear is taught to you. So I would say you should enter this, especially if you have a proper appraisal of the forces. But even if you don't, but especially if you do, you should know that you're in a power position to produce change. And fear is the greatest hindrance to growth. Fear paralyzes you wherever you are afraid. And fear is always, the thing you're fearing is always worse than the thing itself. So a lot of you get comfortable with fear because you might, you feel it and you may think it's natural. It's been taught to you in a million different ways. You've been taught to fear God. God, if you know God, God is not a force to be feared. God is unconditional love. I've seen God, I've seen the light, but I don't have to see it. God's kindness beyond any expression. Who's going to fear kindness? Who's going to fear love? You can't have love with a partner if you're in fear of that partner. So I'm saying that that's their scam. But you will particularly be reinforced against fear if you know your position, if you know what it's possible for you to do. Gloria Briscoe said, typing in caps is a form of yelling, and it's rude. So Nkrumah is making the point that scare us to death like the Democrats did the last 4 years. No, Democrats didn't scare you for the last 4 years. That's part of the propaganda. They actually put forward one of the two best programs that the Democrats have put forward, and you don't even know about it, but I'm not going into that today. You don't know that that $1.9 trillion that Biden put out there was real key to rebuilding the country and helping us as we organize in rebuilding Black families and Black communities. And when they talk to you about Project 2025, if you took it as scare, that's your interpretation. But a lot of people were saying, oh, they're not serious about it. Now they're implementing it. So that, I didn't take that because I did my own homework. I already knew what they were doing. If you did yours, you wouldn't take it either. To know the enemy, there's two rules for winning. Know your enemy, know yourself. And if you know those two, you'll know how to win. So we've gone through some of this before. But the key point I want to make here is that don't fall for it. This fear thing, you better get smart and know your enemy, know what they're doing, and then know what you can do to defeat certain objectives and eventually defeat them overall, because they've got 2 years. They're operating on that principle. They've got 2 years because it'll be 2 years before midterm elections. So they're going to do all the damage they can do in that time. And so it's going to be a question of what you can do to handle that. At the same time, prepare to defeat them overall. But more important, prepare to rebuild your families and communities, something that we need more than anything. So my presentation today is on Trump's elimination of DEI, attempts to return to Jim Crow. So I think that the first thing you need to appreciate is your own power and understand that in the exercise of power on certain levels, and for this level, this is appropriate, there's a form of power, and that's a form of power that comes in the form of alliances and coalitions. The rule You should read my books, Art of Leadership, Volume 1 and 2. I led the only successful Black freedom, Black power movement. The job movement that we led, we accomplished that on our own. We didn't need any alliances or coalitions, and we did that on our own. But then there were some moves that we made that required the involvement of others. And these were coalitions. A coalition is a relationship between organizations that's temporary. Temporary. You only do coalitions when you can't win on your own. An alliance is a relationship of organizations that are long-term. You only do those when you can't achieve your objectives on your own. And in either case, you need to put yourself in a position where you either are leading it or you have a major say-so in it. So in the case of Blacks, the reason that emancipation occurred is because the North was losing the Civil War. They had virtually no victories, and the South had fewer soldiers. The South did not have the manufacturing capacity behind it that the North had. Their capacity was based on slavery, and they weren't about to arm Blacks to fight, though they were considering it at the end of the Civil War. That would be a contradiction in and of itself, because Blacks ain't fighting unless they get something out of it. So emancipation occurred because the only way the North could win was if Blacks fought. And so it was the North that came to Black people and asked Black people to join in the war. And the response of Black people inherently was, we ain't fighting for nothing unless we get emancipation. And so Lincoln is signing the Emancipation Proclamation, and his advisors tell him, don't do it until you have a victory. Because if you do it before you have a victory, you are going to look like you are dependent upon and reaching out to Ethiopia for help. Black people, Ethiopia. So Lincoln waited until Antietam, a bare victory for the North, to then issue the Emancipation Proclamation. So the key point here is that it was the North that came to this nation within a nation of African people and asked them to fight for the North to save their white behinds. And Blacks were more than willing to do it because it took the chains off of us. And I want to say this. This is not generally known. Martin R. Delaney and others, they had planned this a good 20 years before. See, the book I'm finishing now on Seba and Sondráya, you're going to find this out because there was a group called the Loyal League. It was a secret society. And this brother, Martin R. Delaney, Frederick Douglass, Nat Turner, they were part, Harriet Tubman, they were part of the Loyal League. This was a secret society. You don't know nothing about this because it ain't in your history books. Why? Because smart Blacks don't talk. And enslaved Africans carried out African culture, and one point of African culture is being tight-lipped. We keep secrets. You hear me? And one of the biggest secrets kept in slavery is that the strongest institution we had was secret societies, and you know nothing about them. It's one of my specialties. I'm a damn warrior. So I study how to fight. Secret societies was one of the best ways. We don't know that the institutions built after slavery by free Blacks, they were built by secret societies. The secret societies were the educational systems of Africa. organized during the period of colonialism. So you had to go into the bush to teach your culture and stuff like that. So the point is, Martin R. Delaney and others, they had projected how this war was going to go. They had predicted that there would be a war between North and South, and they had predicted that in the beginning, the issue would not be the abolition of slavery. They had predicted that we would have to put that on the table, and it is no. They were secret to our people. Now, they're wrong, absolutely wrong. They were secret to the oppressor. Our people knew of these secret societies. You haven't done your homework. You should go and read Carter G. Woodson's book on African History Reconsidered. It's the follow-up to Miseducation of the Negro. But that ain't where you really get it. You need to do your homework on the secret societies themselves that were formed in the very beginning of the formation of this country. Prince Hall was one of the first, but it wasn't the Masons that were the primary organizers of this. So I'm not going to get off into this. I'm just going to make the point that we are thinkers, and there were a lot of us in slavery and out, that is free men and women of color, and those enslaved who had projected this. And so they had planned for this period of a civil war and planned for what we should do. So for your information, those of you that underestimate us, you do it at your own peril. And we got some black buck dancers right now who are doing it at their own peril. Snoop Doggy Dogg and others whose careers need to be put in the garbage can. Jeez, I'm not pushing misinformation. So in the Civil War, what ends up happening is 170,000 blacks take part in the Union Army, and they provide the balance of power. We won the Civil War. And I've covered this in previous shows. There's an old Southerner, there was a lot of whites who said this: we will win until the Negroes got involved. That ain't the word they used. They were right. Baddest warriors on the earth are black. So the point is, emancipation came through a coalition. Now, somebody quoted John Henry Clark, who said that we're alone. John Henry Clark was not an organizer, was not a leader. And I know what he meant, meaning even when we have support from other groups, they ain't in love with us. Power ain't got nothing to do with love. But there's no power on earth that is operated without alliances and coalitions. Hannibal, who had the best record as a warrior on the planet Earth, his army was made up of a coalition of people who were paid to fight simply because his nation, Carthage, couldn't handle a standing army. It was a trading empire, So the very makeup of his army was a coalition of different groups, with Hannibal leading it as the baddest warrior, and some from Carthage as well. Ed Donaldson says a good book about the Loyal League is A Fire of Freedom, Abraham Galloway and the Slave, Civil War by David Chalesky. Very good. By the way, I apprenticed under John Henry Clark for 25 years and love him. So I don't know what this is with Mr. Nkrumah or Paris Nkrumah. Now, so the point is, coalitions give you that when you have to do it. And in this case, the North made a coalition with us. And we were glad to join it because the benefits we got out of it was to shift our relationship from being chattels to something else. Alliances are long-term relationships. And so for a period of time, blacks maintained their relationship to the Republican Party when it comes to politics because it was involved in emancipation. And then later, the Democratic Party because of the New Deal and some benefits that we got in the way of jobs and other things, even though the New Deal cut blacks out of those benefits in the South in the beginning. So in politics, we've had alliances because you can't win, particularly at the national level, unless you're in coalition with other groups. So what we faced in terms of this last election is a setback. It's a tactical setback, and largely because the Democratic Party underestimated its opponent and ran the wrong strategies. And as a result, and also because Trump and his forces used the internet to do programming on the black electorate, and a sector of the black electorate fell for it. But that ain't why the election was lost, because blacks, 87% of us voted for our interests. Only a small percentage voted for Trump, but a sector, along with a sector of other groups, didn't vote. And one of the reasons why some of them didn't vote is because now a lot of us are wired up on algorithms, and Ogawa was, because he's up on the youth and what's happening with the youth, and those algorithms were saying neither the Democratic Party or the Republican Party has represented you. That was designed to tell you just don't vote, because they figured blacks would not be foolish enough to vote for Trump. And then they started running biographies on Biden that was accurate up to a point, showing how he had been involved in the criminal justice system, imprisoning blacks, and a whole bunch of other things, supporting wars, blah, blah, failing to note that he had changed course in this administration, made a big shift, which will make him the third best president you've ever had and don't know it, and earmarked targeted money specifically for blacks around infrastructure, chips, reindustrialization, and saving the environment. A number of these things, particularly saving the environment, which Trump is going to do everything he can to dismantle. Part of Project 2025. So the point is, some of us concluded that we shouldn't vote, and some in the Democratic coalition did, some of whom for good reason, because they were opposed to what happened in Gaza. And if you're an Arab, I could see why you wouldn't vote. And a black person, I could see why you wouldn't want to vote. But in the end, the question is, what's in your interest, your national interest, you know? And your national interest was defeating Trump and seeing that you'd have a second term where you could implement some of the biggest changes in the economy that's been made in history since Roosevelt, and in some ways more than Roosevelt, because they were structural. So when it comes to power, then what we can say is that we've had a setback in the victory of the MAGA forces, and it's been a setback of an alliance and our relationship to that alliance. And unless some corrections are made, they may have more, unless the Democratic Party makes corrections. And so one of the things that blacks need to do is put pressure on the party to address, to continue to address, and on a larger level, the issues of black, brown, red, and yellow people, especially black people, and the issue of poverty, and to address those. And to move away from this new democratic model where they act like they're Republican, when in fact, the Republican Party has gone right wing. So all the forces out there have to do that. But the main thing we have to do is build our own power, rebuild it because our families and our communities are in worse shape than they have been for a long time. And I've gone through some of this before. So that's part of it. So what we need to understand is we are now, and I said this before, I just want to repeat it, we're in the period of the second post-reconstruction. This started in 1968, and this is a period where, starting with Nixon, it was a move to take back the gains that we had made in the second Reconstruction that started really with the Montgomery bus boycott. And those gains destroyed legal apartheid in the South, which Trump is trying to restore across the country, and the right to vote, which the Supreme Court has eroded by attacking the enforcement provisions of the Voting Rights Act. That is the provision that says that Southern states and those states in the North that have used measures to remove Blacks from the ballot box, that they no longer have to prove that they're not doing that. And that has allowed maximum cheating to go against us and people of color. So this is second post-Reconstruction. Nixon started it when he came in. He said, because he got no Black votes, Blacks were smart enough not to vote for him. He said, Blacks didn't vote for me, I owe them nothing. And then he proceeded to attack some of the gains of the 60s. And one of the first things he went after was the part of the War on Poverty program that empowered people at the community level, one that I formed coalitions of groups with to take it over and organize a huge number of Black people behind it. But because the force of Blacks in the second Reconstruction, where we regained rights lost in the first post-Reconstruction, because Blacks had so much power, Nixon, in effect, implemented the Great Society program. A lot of people don't know that because Nixon was, about as bad as you could get. But he had no choice. He even put before Congress, and I pointed this out on a previous show, guaranteed annual income, which is something that's needed now. So that people who are making low incomes, there's a guaranteed check going to them that bring their income up to 60, 70, 80,000 a year. And that would be easy to do, contrary to popular opinion. Nixon actually had that in his legislation. Why? Because he couldn't break away from the Great Society program. The movement of Blacks in the second Reconstruction was so strong, he had to continue many of them. Racist though he was, as racist as Johnson was, who carried these out, in terms of civil rights measures, responding particularly to Birmingham and to Selma. So we're in the second post-Reconstruction. In the first, they took away the right to vote that had been gained in the first Reconstruction. And reduced us to a situation where we're enslaved by society and by the states, particularly Southern states, where Blacks caught hell all over the country. At that time, the balance of power in the world was against us because white power, if you want to call it, you could use the term, I don't use it, but for that time, you could use the term white supremacy, was strong across the globe, with Britain ruling the world, with the sun never setting on the British Empire. So what's different between now and then is that there are power shifts in the world. The reason that Blacks could do what we did in Africa, achieve African independence movements. The reason that the British and the French gave out independence in the Caribbean is they no longer had the power to hold on to it. And in this case, we had openings to begin to organize in ways that we could unhinge the first post-reconstruction. And so today, don't forget that during this period of the second post-reconstruction.
Senator Barr says the show is not live.
Oh, shit.
You forgot to press the live button.
I did press the live button. It said end stream. It's on live now. It says live.
That's what he said on here.
When did he say it? How long ago?
10:18.
Yeah, well, I've got it. I've covered it since then.
Okay.
Yeah, so what we have to understand then is that we're in a second period of the second post-reconstruction. And what's different about this period is that we have power. And some by ourselves, some in alignment. And I know some of you say you don't want to do any alliances or coalitions. Well, there are times where you have to. And so that's dictated by circumstances. I'll give you my example. I've given it to you before. The big one was when Johnson came up with the War on Poverty program. And he had a provision in there called maximum feasible participation. I didn't know why he stuck it in there. And see, the War on Poverty was a program that Johnson put together. He wanted to eliminate poverty, but as he got engaged in the war in Vietnam, more and more money was being shifted to Vietnam. But at the time he implemented it, he was a New Dealer. He was a supporter of Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So he really wanted to address poverty. And he knew he was killing himself doing it because having passed the civil rights legislation that he was forced to, but he chose to work on that, he lost the white vote in the Democratic Party. He knew that would happen. He was a master politician. It didn't take no master to figure this out. So in the first phase of the War on Poverty program, which had millions of dollars going into communities across the country, they had a provision called maximum feasible participation. I didn't know what his intention was at that time. He actually did this to go over the head of big city bosses like Daley in Chicago and like the segregationists in the South, and enable community groups to get control of this money. Now, I'm a Garveyite. Most of my organizing has been on economic self-reliance, but I'm not a fool. I'm a strategist, and I could see that if I didn't take over this poverty program, it was going to take over the troops that I had used in the Black Freedom Movement, and I was now moving to organize a Black organization called Pan-African People's Organization that still operates. It's been in operation since 1966 and was financed by the Black community. And so I pulled together a coalition. Here's the rule in coalitions. You lead it. You only do it if you have to. So don't tell me don't do it when you have to. Circumstances will dictate what you have to do. So I brought in the Chinese American community. I've told this to other people before, but I'm giving you this now as an example of how this works. A guy named J.K. Choi, multimillionaire, general in Chiang Kai-shek's army, and Chiang Kai-shek was no good, but this guy was a progressive. Multimillionaire, owned a bank. We were friends. And by the way, I'm a hardline nationalist. But if you're going to build power in a country in which it ain't all African, you better have relationships with other power centers at certain times. And so in this particular case, Chinatown, the largest Chinese American community in the United States. And so we were friends. He liked what we were doing because we were opening up doors for Chinese Americans, Latinos, Native Americans, everybody. And I go to Chinatown, eat Chinese food, blah, blah. So this was the case for about 3 years. And then I was raised in the Bernal Heights. which was a predominantly white community. But when I went to school for junior high school, it was in a Mexican community, the Mission. And my best friend in elementary school was a Mexican. And I only had one friend from elementary through high school, and that was Tito Moto, a Mexican. And then I had none after elementary school. I had friends that were associates. Because for me, a friend in need is a friend indeed. And right now, I didn't have no need. I didn't have nobody looking out for me. So, that was fine. I had associates, you know what I mean? But I knew the power structure in the Mission. And so I decided to form a group called Citizens United Against Poverty. And then I went to the J.K. Choi, and I went to a guy named Gallegos. He was the leader in the Latino community. And I said, I'm forming a group called Citizens United Against Poverty. We're going to take over the poverty program. 25% will go to Chinatown. 25% will go to the Latino, community, largely Mexican Americans. And 50% is under my control. See, in a coalition, you control it. And they said yes. And so for 2 to 3 years, so I went in the mayor's office and got all this money without a fight. That's called the perfect strategy, winning without a fight. And so for those close to 3 years, we ran the poverty program. I took no money because I take no money for anything that I lead. And I put someone else in charge. I've told you all this before. And we organized the only block organizing done in the history of this country other than by Denmark Vesey in his slave rebellion. Block by block, 45,000 Black people were organized. All that money went to that. So this is an example of a coalition that you enter only when you have to, and you control it when you're in it. And the guy that woke me up, he cut the paycheck for Chinatown. So even though the Chinese got 25%, we were controlling the payroll that went to them. You hear me? So what I'm saying is, there are times where you do coalitions. John Henry Clark and I never talked strategy because John Henry Clark wasn't a strategist. He wasn't an organizer. He was a scholar. And I respected him for that. So John can say we're all alone, and there's some truth in that. But in fact, it all depends on how you roll your power out, what you get. You hear me? So the point is, we're in the second post-reconstruction, and we've had a back and forth seesaw battle in this case, the presidency. You got a Barack Obama in. Our mistake was we didn't pressure him, and there was no movement to pressure him at the presidential level. And then Trump gets in because the Democrats don't realize what they're faced with and don't know how to handle him. But then in 2020, Blacks in South Carolina make a decision to back what had been a losing candidate, which was Biden. And then Obama gets in and gets everybody else to get out of the race. And he didn't want Biden either. He had said he's too old, blah, blah. He didn't want Bernie Sanders. He wanted Bernie Sanders even less than he wanted Biden. He didn't want Bernie Sanders at all because he's to the left. And that's what the party needed. So the point is, Biden get into office was based on a coalition, but Blacks were leading that, and Black Lives Matter made the difference in terms of that street organizing. So the point is, we've had a seesaw battle when it comes to the presidency. And so Trump has come back this time. My point is that battle, and that's a longer term set of battles, that battle ain't over. And that's why they're going to try and ram through everything they can in as short a period of time as they can, because they know they only have 2 years. They are likely to lose the House in 2 years. And so they're going to be doing everything they can to ram everything down the throats of this system and do as much damage as possible. Now, the other thing about this historical period is we talk about our power and how we organize, especially in our communities, but also understanding what's at stake with this larger set of campaigns that are being organized in this country, and particularly around MEGA, is that this period of post-reconstruction coincides also with a period of the decline and fall of the West, Europe, Western Europe, because that's where the power has been centered, has fallen as a power. Even though they have a European Union, basically that's been formed to check Germany. And they've had splits in this. Brexit. The British have split off from it. And the British are now in the garbage can as a power. The sun is set on them permanently. Then you have the shift of the right and everything else going on in Europe, but it is a weakened force, even though their combined productivity is high, slightly higher than the US. It's not under one nation's control, but as a global power, they've gone down, even though they still have a little bit going for them. And the United States is messing them up in the exercise of that, especially with Ukraine. They have really weakened Germany around Ukraine. They've weakened them because Ukraine blew up their pipeline. So the cheap oil and gas they're getting from the Russians blew it up. And you know, the Germans hated that, but they couldn't say anything because the US was backing this war. And so the US has made real blunders consistently when it comes to foreign policy. And Biden made his in terms of Ukraine, allowing that war to go down when it could have been negotiated out, and in doing nothing to stop the genocide against the people in Gaza. But this country's gone down through war, and they've lost almost all of them. And so we're in a period right now of the decline of the United States and the rise of the East, especially China today, Africa tomorrow. So the question was raised earlier about the coalition that has been formed between China and other nations. And that does represent a power shift, but it is an emerging power shift going on in the world right now. So in this second period, as we move, the US doesn't have the strength that it had. It's not the sole power that can just snap its finger and everybody else jumps. And that's also why Russia has been able to get away with some of the stuff it's done, because in Ukraine, because there's a power center that they could rely on outside the United States. That's India, that's China, that's Brazil, that's Africa. It's a whole lot of nations that are not jumping to the United States. Now, in looking at MAGA and looking at their whole move right now and their agenda, a key thing to appreciate, and one of the reasons why the campaign to remove what they call aliens, these are people from South and Central America, from Africa, from the Caribbean. This is because while the right wing has a theory called the Great Replacement Theory, which is they are being replaced by people of color, the fact is what's happening is, for the first time in human history, a major world power is undergoing a certain demographic shift. When I say a certain, I mean something that's a certainty, can't be reversed. And so this country is moving from a predominantly white nation state to a nation state of people of color. And so Trump has fed into this the Democrats have also caved in because they did a huge amount of removal of people of color from this country. And in fact, Obama was called the deporter in chief because he had deported more people out of this country than any president prior to him, you know. And when you see what Trump is threatening now with 15 million or whatever deportations, he's saying starting with the illegals, but they've already moved on some people that, you know, are citizens. A person was arrested just a day or so ago who's a veteran, you know. But this is a move to try and reverse the decline of the population of this country. And the abortion decisions are about white people having more babies, but they don't want to. They're in decline. Nations that are prosperous, generally, they have a falling in life, of new births because people are prosperous and they want to concentrate on material things. In this case, families are falling apart because people are in poverty and there's a choice between two cultures. And so what's happening is family life has been eroded for blacks, for whites, and for some other groups of color. So what you're seeing here is that at this time, you have a demographic shift, and a good deal of the agenda of Trump is about trying to reverse this. So his slogan, "Make America Great Again," which is a Nazi slogan, which really translates "Make America White Again." And so a lot of his policies in Project 2025, a lot of the policies that he had in his first term, but he was winging it then because he didn't expect to be elected and he didn't have an agenda. Now they have one. And so it's a systematic one. And you can say that it's cultural, ethnic cleansing. This is part of what's happening. So while Trump in his inaugural address thanked Latino Americans and blacks for voting for him, which is correct, 54% of Latino men voted for him, but it's incorrect that 87% of black people voted against him. So how are you going to be thanking us when we're opposed to you, by and large? He was really saying he's thanking those blacks brainwashed and foolish enough to vote for him. So part of what's behind MAGA is to correct this demographic shift, but it's like trying to correct the flow of the ocean, because this is a high tide that is not going to be reversed. And in 20 years, the majority of this country will be black, brown, red, and yellow. And what this means is not just a racial shift, it means a cultural shift, a political shift, and ultimately it could mean an economic shift, because we're living in a period now where the greatest disparity between rich and poor exists in this country, where 1% controls 40 or 50% of this country's wealth. 1%. And that is not going to hold up forever. And so these are forces that the MAGA movement wants to address, and certain forces within the white power elite are jumping on board when they were opposed to MAGA, some of them to protect their own economic interests. Now, MAGA is fake populism, but its base believes, predominantly white, believes that Trump is getting in office to carry out an attack against the deep state. And this can even fool some radicals if they don't understand what's really going on. So many of them think Trump is going in to shake things up. You know what I mean? And to turn things around for them. But why do I call this fake populism? And most of you realize it is, first of all, the base that believes in this, white workers, they're supporting somebody who is against the working class, white working class, who is against the minimum wage. Not only does he not want to raise the $7 minimum wage, they don't want one at all. They think $7 is too much, you know? So this is somebody against the group that is supporting him. And so many of the objectives of Project 2025 are actually anti the mass of people in this country, not only black and brown, red and yellow, but against the masses of whites, not against the elite, but the masses of whites. And so with Trump having the presidency, the House by a very narrow margin, the Senate by a few votes, the presidency, and the Supreme Court, he has maximum power to do maximum damage over these 2 years. And that's what Project 2025 seeks to achieve, and anything else Trump throws in, like we're going to take back Greenland and the Panama Canal. Trump is the most unpredictable part in this. So if you look at the objectives of Project 2025, and we ran them down before, people complaining, oh, you're trying to scare us. No, I'm trying to tell you what they're trying to do, what they plan to do, and why you should stop them. So there are a number of items here, and this isn't all of them, but these are just some of the objectives of Project 2025. And if you go back to previous shows, I've covered others. Some of them are cultural issues, and this is real key because part of the way in which MAGA won was on diverting people away from the economic hardships they were facing and offering cultural problems and cultural solutions. And so ending no-fault divorce, this is kind of like the right wing's thing about white man should be in charge. And if you get in a marriage, you shouldn't just be able to get out of it. You know what I mean? Complete ban on abortions, no exceptions. The Supreme Court has basically supported that, and they're trying now to prevent any efforts to sidestep it because the states that have support for abortion still provide an alternative, so they want to go after that. Ban on contraceptions, increase the white birth rate. I'm sure they're not concerned about ours being increased. But so this is supposed to be an agenda for poor people. Now, where does poverty come in any of these? Abortion, no-fault divorce, contraceptives. That's got nothing to do with it. But then additional tax breaks for the rich, particularly corporations. Now, here's the deal on what Trump's going to do on taxes. This, I don't need to be a prophet to tell you this. He's made it clear he wants to extend the $2 trillion tax cut for the rich. And in case you think it's not, this is how it works. I was listening to C-SPAN, and they were doing testimony on this. The Senate is interviewing Trump's candidates for cabinet positions. So in one of the C-SPAN shows, Congressman pointed out that in a $2 trillion tax cut, the rich will get a minimum of $300,000 each, and you will get $6. Did you hear that? And when they put that through, they're going to say, we have to pay for this because we've already shifted 2 trillion or maybe 3, but right now it's supposed to be 2 to the rich. So we got to pay for this. And how are they going to pay for that? They're going to go after cutting Social Security and cutting Medicare, which are listed as objectives in Project 2025. They also claim to be for the working class, but Project 2025 said they need to have higher taxes on the working class. They also want to eliminate unions. And so when you eliminate unions, you eliminate the pay that you get, the better pay that you get from unions. And that has been a major objective of Project 2025. For those of us that have retirement, and I think this is especially true for Social Security, raise the retirement age, particularly for Social Security. After they cut it, it will take longer for a person to be, they'll have to be older to get it. And remember, most people in this country, they rely on Social Security as their sole income when they retire because they don't have retirement pensions. And then, of course, cut Social Security, cut Medicare. In the Affordable Care Act, they're going to go after that. And while that wasn't the best thing, it was better than what they've had before. What you need is a guaranteed program for healthcare, raise prescription drug prices. The Biden administration cut the prices of drugs. They're talking about raising it. Eliminate the Department of Education. Now, we know that the Department of Education was created by Jimmy Carter. The Department of Education has major enforcement provisions around DEI. And seeing that discrimination in education, when money goes to states, the federal government is saying they've got to go in a way that people of color can get some benefit from it. What Trump and company are doing is saying we want to send all that education money back to the states, and then they've got other provisions where they want to see that religious schools get public tax dollars. And they already are doing private education at the public level, but they want to carry it to another level to reward their base of evangelical Christians. Ban African American and gender studies at all levels of education. We have seen the book banning that has been going on for a while. And so that is a part of a major drive to eliminate anything that's got to do with the history of Black, brown, red, or yellow people in the curriculum. And I'll deal more with this as I deal with DEI. Ban all books and curriculum dealing with slavery. So we can act like slavery never existed. Ending climate protection. Now, this is a key one that they're going after to see that, as Trump said in his inaugural address, they want to, dig for oil and everything else and pollute the climate as much as possible. And he told oil executives that they gave him $1 billion, they could pollute as much as they wanted to. Increase drilling for oil and other things that pollute the environment. Promote and expand capital punishment. Most people don't know this. When Trump left office the first time, the first thing he did, one of the last things he did was sign orders on the execution of everyone on death row that he could, sign an execution order on. And Biden stopped that. In marriage equality. In other words, women should be subordinate to men. It should be the old school, you know what I mean? Good old patriarchy. Condemn single mothers and promote traditional families. we got a lot of single mothers because they can't afford to marry, and single men too, for that matter, because they can't afford to marry. So you're going to condemn them and reduce them to even lower levels of poverty while you say you're favoring marriage, but you're not doing anything to make a family viable so that you can marry. Defund the FBI and Homeland Security. Now that's one I'm for. I'm not opposed to that one. Use the military to break up domestic protests. And you're seeing this now, not in domestic protests, but they're using the military on the border around deportation. They're using military transport to fly people out of the country who are being deported. And they're preparing to use the military in other ways. And so the Hegseth, the candidate for Secretary of Defense, who is totally unqualified, a man who's an alcoholic, who's fallen all over himself, who's an abuser of women, who has no experience in management. He is up for, it may have been approved by now, for head of Department of Defense, absolutely unqualified, but he's being put in there so that he will do Trump's bidding, whatever he wants the military to do. And by the way, the first person Trump got rid of when it comes to military leadership was a 4-star female, white female general in the Coast Guard. So they're not, Hegseth has written about this. They're going after cleaning out the Defense Department, particularly high-level officers who are generals, who are black, brown, red, or yellow, or women. They're out to clean that out. But not listed in what I'm listing here, I mentioned this before, one of the objectives of Project 2025 is to restore the Army and the military in general to 1970 demographics, white. That's what they like to do. In birthright citizenship. And you see, for people that, a few people came on the show and said, well, Trump is not behind Project 2025. Like hell he isn't, And this is one of them, guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. And they knew this would be challenged. But again, it's sending out a message. And particularly this is aimed at people of color who've come in here who may not have been legal, but they gave birth to children or whatever. It's sending a message that you're not welcome, And whether they win or lose on this, and they should lose on this, this is designed to make it clear where they're going. It's telling their base, we're producing a white agenda. And then a ban on Muslims entering the country. That's Project 2025. And Trump in his first term did a holdup on that. Then eliminate certain agencies like the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, the FDA, and others that protect people, in some cases protect them around their health, and others the environment. And continue to pack the Supreme Court with right-wing judges. So this, we told you this was happening before it happened, not to scare you, but to simply tell you that this is what's happening. And I'm telling you that because there's some ways you can fight some of this, but you got to know what you're fighting. Unless you want to put your head in the ground and like an ostrich, leave your butt exposed. And then that is a sure recipe for butt kicking. So Trump's move to eliminate DEI is an attempt to return to Jim Crow. And this is the main point I want to make here. They're using this as justification. They're using two things. One is wokeness, and the other is critical race theory. And they've been doing this for a while. This isn't something that just started with this election. They're taking from our culture the emphasis on waking up, a feature central to Malcolm X's message, that he underwent an awakening and his mind became free. Or Frederick Douglass's message during enslavement, that he had been paralyzed by fear until he fought back. The slave master, Covey, whipped him, and he said he could never be a slave anymore. He was no longer afraid of his so-called master. I talk about my experience of waking up, wokeness. They call it wokeness. We don't call it wokeness. It's just simply having a free mind. Free your mind. And as the father of Funkadelic said, I clean it up and your behind will follow. You understand? So what's wrong with being awake? What do you want? Sleepness? Is that what you want? And with that, they were able to get a certain section of liberals. Bill Maher, for example, so-called liberal, had a meeting with the richest man in the world on his show where he was just grinning and buck dancing and talking about how he didn't like woke either. In other words, you like black folks who were asleep. You know what I mean? So this was being used as an excuse for going against DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is the new term for affirmative action. And I want to say this. The title DEI or affirmative action has been labeled by whites as putting unqualified people in positions, when in fact, these are programs starting with Johnson when he issued his executive order where he put forward affirmative action as a key measure to see that blacks who had been denied opportunities and jobs and education and many other areas of life, those doors open up. And so it was to give blacks a chance to be on an equal footing, though it'd be hard after centuries of denying us basic rights. But that's what affirmative action or DEI is all about. It's about people who are often overqualified that don't even get the door open to them. So that's what that was about. Trump's executive order on attacking DEI, the first thing was to overturn the affirmative action decisions of the Johnson administration, to overturn them, go to the root. He's not smart enough to figure this out. This is, again, the Heritage Foundation and right-wing think tanks that laid out this agenda. So their objective in going after diversity, equity, and inclusion or affirmative action is to root it out, going to the very root. So they're going after nullifying Johnson's affirmative action orders that nobody had the nerve to pull before, and using it under wokeness. This is promoting wokeness. What's wrong with that? And then they're using it under critical race theory, which we know is a theory, or you should know, came out of law schools where they were teaching how racism is structured into the legal system, the economic, political, social, educational system of the United States. It was not widely taught, but it was taught in law schools. And this is part of what Trump wanted to uproot. But I really want to say this. I want you to really hear this. Racism, what we've called white supremacy in the past, asserts white superiority, asserts that whites are superior and blacks and people of color are inferior. But the fact is, racism itself is based on a deep sense of inferiority that whites have. And Trump is a perfect example of it. Because anytime you hear Trump saying somebody's as dumb as a rock, be careful what comes out of your mouth, because it is often an expression of what you think of yourself. Trump has hidden. He has demanded that all the schools he attended, elementary school, the military academy they put in to try and discipline him, and the school where he got a degree in economics, that all of those grades be locked up and not shown to the press. So when he's saying somebody's as dumb as a rock, who you think he's talking about? But the key point is that that's a deep sense of inferiority that whites have, because as they emerge, and they're the last to engage in this process called civilization, what they saw was the high achievement of Africans, of Asians, of Native Americans, of South Pacific Islanders. And I think that this is what drives this mentality of putting people down solely based on color, and colors that are beautiful. You know, no other people in the world have done that. That's a deep belief in inferiority. So that's what you need to understand, that this isn't great self-confidence. This is a lack of it. And this is what's caused them to lose in all these battles they fought. They didn't bother to study the Vietnamese. They just assumed, because they were yellow people, as Malcolm would say, rice eaters, that they could just run over them. They didn't know that Genghis Khan couldn't take Vietnam. They didn't know that the Chinese couldn't. Every people that have tried to take Vietnam, they got took. They didn't know that. They went in just assuming that these people were inferior. That's a deep sense of inferiority, and it gets your butt kicked. Now, in looking at Trump's elimination of DEI, it didn't start with his executive order. It started in 2016 when Trump traveled to Rochester, a blue-collar city with a large, culturally and politically conservative white working class base that voted for Trump in 2016 and 2020. And this is what he said, quote, "We will terminate every diversity, equity, and inclusion program across the entire federal government." And we've seen that that's what his executive order is calling for right now, and telling people in diversity departments, because it's embedded in different parts of the federal government, to stop immediately. And anyone that observes anybody engaged in any kind of diversity activity at all should report it. And they're given a short period of time to report it. So a coalition of dozens of conservative groups prepared to make Trump's stand on this a reality. The Heritage Foundation think tank and other right-wing groups began shaping a anti-DEI agenda. And so one of the things that they addressed it to, and you've seen it now with his executive orders, is to corporations. And so not only is he saying that you should end diversity in hiring in the government, you should end diversity in hiring in the corporate suites, big business. And they are saying that the corporations have been weakened by having diversity programs, when the reverse is the case, when they're able to draw from the best talent, no matter what the color. They've tied the attack on DEI to critical race theory. Critical race theory has asserted, but it's not just critical race theory, but any study of African American history, of political history of this country, economic or social history of this country, it shows that racism is structured into the society. And it asserts that historical patterns of racism are embedded in the law and in American institutions. And so it asserts that that needs to be uprooted. That is what all of these moves have been made to accomplish. So the right wing, MAGA in particular, they want to reverse the DEI revolution in labor policy. And this is the big scam that they're using. And this is the scam the Supreme Court has already used, that they want to use a colorblind philosophy. When they stripped the voting rights, the Supreme Court did, of its enforcement provisions, then it was under the illusion that Roberts, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, said was that the age of racism is over. Now we can be colorblind, colorblind. And so they want to pretend like this isn't racism, All they're saying is that they want to ignore racism by saying that by being colorblind, they will ignore the fact that you're black, brown, red, or yellow. But the fact of the matter is, these are designed to eliminate policies that prevent racist practices against Blacks and people of color. Russ Vought, Vought, was Trump's budget director in his first term, and he is before the Senate now as budget director in the second term. And on a previous show, I pointed out that he wrote the enforcement provisions of Project 2025 and is a major writer of Project 2025 in general. He's the implementer of Trump's agenda because he's the man that controls the money, and he knows where all the money goes. And so he knows how to stop it, redirect it, and everything else. So Russ Vought made the following statement. Getting rid of critical race theory from federal agencies and diversity is a key objective of the Trump administration. And it includes policies on bias, including unconscious biases, which DEI was designed to address. They want to eliminate any programs that address that. So critical race theory, which says that racism is structured into the society in doing book bans on slavery, book bans on African and African American history, and of Native American and any other history of color, is designed to make it appear that America's never really had a race problem. Civil rights groups have argued, and they were arguing long before Trump came into office, that Project 2025 was laying the groundwork for far-reaching rollbacks on civil rights laws. And that's essentially what this is about, because DEI is designed to attack that at a fundamental level, at the federal level and at the private sector level. I should point out, some corporations are saying that they're not going to go along with Trump. Costco is one of them. And there will probably be others, and I'm going to talk about what you can do about this one to address it. Project 2025's director is a man named Paul Dans, who said to Steve Bannon, who was described as Trump's brain and who managed his campaign for president the first time. He said, quote, "We want everyone walking into office on the same page for the first 180 days. So if you're looking at the people that Trump is appointing, these are people designed to implement each phase of this. And don't say I'm trying to scare you. I'm trying to tell you what you're up against. So when you fight them, you have some chances." Jonathan Berry, a member of Trump's first administration and the lead author of a chapter on the Labor Department and related agencies, said that Project 2025 continues the work of the first Trump administration that banned diversity training by the federal government and by government contractors. They're also recommending that same thing be done in private industry. So one of the things that this order to ban DEI throughout the federal government does is to bar the government and government contractors from using taxpayer dollars to conduct training against systematic racism, right? This is one. The other is to abolish the Labor Department, Office of Federal Contracts. So they're supposed to be for labor. In this case, this is designed to see that federal contracts don't do anything to guarantee that they have to hire black, brown, red, or yellow people. Another component of the DEI agenda is to eliminate disparate impact liability, DISPARATE, disparate impact liability. That involves the requirement of evaluating whether or not a policy promotes racism, be it conscious or unconscious. They want to eliminate that, right? See, what this shows is carefully sitting down and over a couple of years figuring out all these different rabbit holes that they need to cover up. And then, of course, another meaning of eliminating DEI is eliminating racial classification quotas that halt the collection of employment data in private business. So they don't care if the workforce is all white, we're just not going to look at it. So the rationale for all of this is, again, color blindness. But it's not color blindness that they're promoting, it's racism. Morial, who is the head of the National Urban League, which does good work in terms of keeping track of the status of the Black workforce and stuff like that, and the Black family, says, quote, "They are advocating for color blindness." That really means advocating for a return to white privilege, white racism, or white segregation. Color blindness means blindness to racism. That's basically what it means, blindness to racism. These policies are a return to Reagan's policies, which were based on the myth of reverse discrimination. Now, here's the key thing. Whites are real good at this. Malcolm said that in this society, they're good at making the victim look like the criminal and the criminal look like the victim. And so all of these policies are designed to say, as Trump has said in many of his speeches, that it's whites, particularly white men, who are being discriminated against. And that's part of what that mega base is based on. The assumption that their poor position in terms of lower incomes and weaker families is due to the fact that the government has favored Blacks and people of color over them, when in fact, affirmative action as they have defined it, which is unqualified people getting into office, is exactly what they've done and the Trump administration is doing with the people that they're filling their cabinet choices with, including the President of the United States. So George Floyd, the movement of George Floyd that helped sweep Trump out of the White House in 2020, put corporations in a position where they started to pledge to do more in the area of affirmative action or DEI. But that created among the right, among races in this country, a reaction. And that reaction was to define this as woke corporate policies, when in fact, all they were trying to do was, for a change, do something that was halfway right. A September 2020 memo, again by Voight, spoke for Trump. And this memo said, ideologies that label entire groups of Americans as inherently evil in diversity training matters must be uprooted. Terms like white privilege must be eliminated. Intersectionality must be eliminated. Unconscious bias must be eliminated. And so this is what Trump's executive order is moving to implement. By the federal government and contractors and administrators implementing DEI, these policies are saying that they need to reverse course. State legislatures have, over the last few years, been introducing these same policies. So the point is, this is just one of the measures that is being carried out by Trump. Now, this is a measure you can fight. And in fact, the grassroots is doing this. And I say, everyday Black people smart. They're calling for all kinds of boycotts of various kinds of businesses in this country. So this, one way we can fight this is to carry out selective boycott campaigns against major corporations. When I say selective, a variety of different groups have to come together to agree to do this, because there's a grassroots motion right now where people are withdrawing their money from a lot of these corporations that are going against these DEI policies. And the way you do that is to pick selective corporations that have signed on to Trump's agenda and direct the full wrath of Blacks on them. Not all at once, because you'll scatter your power. We have a per capita income well over $1 trillion, and we can really hurt businesses on this. If we do nothing, we're encouraging this to continue. So this is a major kind of move that the grassroots is calling for, and that needs to be properly organized. And I think that's going to happen, but it needs to happen, because when corporations are faced the things we can do. We have to organize the power of our people, and this is one area where you can organize it effectively. If you get the White House back, you can reverse most of these other policies, though they are trying to restructure the government in some ways in which it will be hard, particularly in eliminating a department like the Department of Education. So a lot of this is going to depend on also long-term strategy. But our main strategy has got to be around rebuilding families and communities in the US and African people doing this at large, and us reaching out to Africa, to the Caribbean, Africans in the diaspora. Some of us have been doing this historically for a long time, but that has to be a part of our overall strategy. Long term, we need to be drawn from the best models that come out of our history. And for the past 4 years, I've been putting forward those long term as well as short term to rebuild families and communities. So we need to make our past serve the present. And so it's going to take nimble, organized strategies to do this. This is a crisis. A crisis has two qualities. One, there's the pain. The other, there's the opportunity. We have the opportunity to tighten up. We have the opportunity to rebuild the most important institution in any society, the family. Because long before Trump was able to pull this off and his MAGA base, the family had been weakened, the Black family, between 68 and now, more than any time in our history. And so we've got to pay attention to models that will help us rebuild families. And a key part of those models is cultural, in terms of the best, drawing from the best of your past, and it's economic. And in the case of cultural, I put forward the twin lineal model, which is not just a model for families, but for communities and for nations. And that's the balance between males and females. And that's really the key for us restoring our own power and integrity and joy in life, love in life. And that is at the root of what we have to do. But it is also key to laying out an agenda for the long-term transformation of this society. So we've got a lot of work to do. And I would say that everyone that watches this show or any shows or whatever you're doing, you should be involved in that. Now, I just want to note a few things about the power elite that we're facing. And that power elite I referred to in the last presentation as it was using Biden's comments on the tech industrial complex. These are the figures that assembled for the inaugural address of Trump. And what you see are in the background to my left are the corporate elite, a lot of the high-tech people, and in fact, that which would have been to the right of Trump's back are some of the richest people in the world. And this is part of what we're dealing with. And so Elon Musk, you can see a circle there, and the richest man in the world, who sat next to Trump's son during his inaugural address. You have Alexander Arnault, who is the son of Bernard Arnault, who's the CEO of LVMH, and then his wife. Jeff Bezos is there, head of Amazon and executive chairman. A man named Sergey Brin, founder of Google. Tim Cook, chief executive of Apple. Harold Hamm, a Trump donor, Isaac Perlmutter, billionaire and former CEO of Marvel, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook. If you look there, you'll see it. And Phil Ruffin, a Trump advisor. And you see people immediately facing him. These are a lot of the political people who serve the economic elite. And you see again, both of them on both sides, including former presidents. So this, because Trump brought his inaugural address indoors, you have really a picture of the white power elite. You want to win anything, you better know your enemy, and you better understand these forces. Some of these forces are anti-Trump people who come in from the cold because they want to benefit from whatever he does, and they don't want to be hurt from the consequences of not doing that. And then others have been supporters all along. During Trump's presentation, you had the Proud Boys demonstrating in Washington, D.C., and their leader, who was an FBI informant, was released from a plus 20-year sentence for time served. And these are all Brother Ogawa put these together. This is the former head of the Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, who's a Black Cuban, by the way. And this is, of course, Elon Musk making his gesture when he addressed one of the inaugural crowds. And historians have generally agreed that that is a fascist salute. There's more to it from the chest, and then he pulls it out. Historians have generally agreed that that's what that is. And when people were telling you that the purpose of Project 2025 is to put fascism in place in America, that wasn't to scare you. That was to give you a proper appraisal of your enemy and what you got to do when it comes to fighting it. So the topic of this show was Trump's elimination of DEI attempts to return to Jim Crow. Your answer better be hell no. I hope you got something from this. Hotep. Let me go through the comments. Peggy Parks Miller, we're building a new pathway forward. Yeah, Robin, what happened is I forgot to hit the on button. That was my fault. That's why you came on late. Peggy Parks Miller had asked about BRICS, and I gave a brief answer. It's a new power center that is countering the one that the U.S. has led so far. Peggy Parks Miller, how much would you need from each of us on a monthly basis? That's a good question. If we had 50 people that made a contribution, $10 a month, or some variety of that. Shea and Kruma, power isn't given, it's taken. It's also built. It's not only taken, because it's not only the power that someone has over you, but it's the power you build among yourself to counter that power. So that's built. Our white supremacy is a global system, not just a U.S. system. Yeah, but that requires an analysis. And for example, I have, for Blacks, I have recommended that Black people should read Lerone Bennett's Negro Mood, later called Black Mood, because it has a chapter called The Black Establishment. That gives you the structure of a group of Blacks who were really set up to try and keep us quiet. But you need to know that group, because anytime you go into motion, that group is one of the groups that's going to be rolled out there. There is a structure for the white power elite, and there are only a few studies that have been done on this. So white supremacy, that even when it was relevant, that's not sufficient to analyze it. You need to know how it's organized. And I'm working on something that probably won't be in more than 120 pages to define that. You need to know how that works. Otherwise, you can't defeat a system unless you know the system. Shea and Kruma, what about white degeneracy? Yeah, that's part of it. White savagery, white barbarism. I respect Frances Cress Welsing and Nellie Fuller, but I'm a warrior, so I have a different, I'm not a psychologist, though I think psychology is very important, the study of it. And we produced some very good scholars on it, including Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. And I'm not trying to scare you to death. And the Democrats, they weren't doing it for 4 years. They did it during the campaign. They should have been doing it for 4 years, telling you the nature of your enemy. Robin uses the term white oppressionists. Adam Price, access to white people is not a human right. Stop being fearful of being on your own. We ain't your daddy. Yeah, true. Anyone, so Paris and Kruma, Che and Kruma says, yes, they did scare us, told us we'd be put back in chains, for instance. Well, that is what this is attempting to do. That's the truth. If somebody tells you the truth, are you afraid of the truth? The only thing you should follow in life is the truth. That's how you know how to defeat it. In Nkrumah, the Democrats only did fear, nothing tangible. Wrong. Infrastructure, chips, environment, reindustrialization, it's put together over $5 trillion. If you call that nothing, then go back and ask, what is the federal budget? That's a number of federal budgets. And guess what? Some of those things can't be reversed. Chips, Trump's not going to reverse chips. Chips is what you need for any manufacturing, anything that you produce. Trump's going to claim it was him that did it, you know? So the point of reindustrializing the country, that was not nothing. The thing is, the Democrats were bad at publicizing what they did. There was an effort by the media to silence it because it's corporate control and to get Biden out of the race. And of course, he had some problems, but Trump has more. They didn't call for him to be removed, you know? So all I can say is that you should know what's going on. In that song, What's Going On? You got to do your homework. So don't make a statement that you can't back up. So this Democrats did nothing but fear mongering and delivered nothing tangible. I have my critique of the Democrats. I'm not a Democrat. I didn't like what Biden did in his war stuff, Ukraine, what he did in Gaza. I liked the slowness. I didn't like the way in which they handled voter disenfranchisement, which was going on for a number of years under the Biden administration, and called it out. You know, I ain't working for nobody. I just try and follow the truth. That's all I'm trying to do with you, is share the truth with you. You know, you want to put your head under the dirt like an ostrich, and don't forget the feather ma'at comes from an ostrich, but that's a bad habit of the ostrich, putting his head in the sand and leaving his butt exposed. You don't want to be like that, you know? Michelle Mayberry, thank you. It was a pleasure to share with you all and ASCAP, the Association for Classical Study of Classical African Civilization, in their Western region, and I'll try and click in to your Southern conference as well. It's an important group that we have in terms of educating us about our history and culture. Nkrumah says, what can they do to us that hasn't already been done to us in the country? You'd be surprised. Ash Shakir Whitaker, and in 100 battles, you will never be imperiled by Sun Tzu. Yeah, if you know your enemy and know yourself and act accordingly. Yeah, very true. Jesse Paris, Che, and Nkrumah. DEI doesn't benefit us. The truth is that affirmative action and DEI benefited white women more than any group. But yeah, it did benefit blacks. Yes, it did. And why you think they're trying to uproot it? That's again putting your head in the sand and saying, oh, it's nothing. Oh, yeah, it is something. They wouldn't be uprooting it if it did nothing. You hear me? Shonda Henderson, good to see you, lady. And Jesse, Che, and Nkrumah, John Henry Clark told we had no friends. He said, if you want a friend, look in the mirror. Yeah, well, that's on the personal level. When it comes to war, you line up friends and enemies. And I don't know a war in history where there weren't some alliances and coalitions going on. And you're at war right now. So you want to act like that's not important? Go right ahead. That means you haven't done any organizing. And by the way, the Black Panther Party had coalitions with Puerto Rican Americans, the Young Lords, with Mexican Americans, the Brown Berets, and inspired Native Americans. I mean, they shouldn't have done that. And then they inspired blacks in, of all places, Israel, who were black Jews, you know, who took the Panthers on as a model to upset the Jewish Zionist establishment. You know, nothing wrong with being inspired by other people and drawing whatever you can from them. Imhotep Akabulan, who was in charge of Woze Community Church in Sacramento, former student of mine. Glad to have him on. There's a real sharp brother there. Brother Imhotep said my first historical tribute at Woze was on Nat Turner. Right on. Jesse, Che, and Kruma, they were secret to our people, not the oppressor. You obviously have not studied this. Don't say what you don't know, Che and Kruma. It was a secret only to us. It wouldn't be a secret otherwise. Heck, smart blacks don't talk like that. Yeah, you got that right. Well, if you consider what I'm presenting, Shay and Kruma, as hilarious, well, I'm sorry, because I can tell you one thing I'm not as a comedian. This is serious stuff. And by the way, I've been doing this 4 years. I ain't getting paid for it. This is just plain love. So if you think I'm out here pushing stuff, you think it's wrong, put out the truth. Huh? Oh, now here we're really going. Jesse Paris, Che, and Kruma. Now y'all just upset they're not buck dancing for Biden and Kamala. What in the hell was wrong for Black entertainers, Black celebrities coming out for Harris when she was trying to organize to defeat someone who's trying to put you back in slavery? And how can you compare that to Snoop Doggy Dogg, who in 2016 said that he was critical of anybody that would support Trump, now turning around and supporting him. And if you don't know what buck dancing is, that's like Jews dancing for Hitler or Black people dancing for the slave master. And why? I've seen the defenses on the internet for money. It's some justification that they got paid. Well, that's a justification for slavery because they not only got paid, they built their economic system off of us. So if that's your position, Shay and Kruma, you need to get your head wrapped on right. And I really thank Ed Donaldson for this information. I've got to write this down right now myself. The Fire of Freedom. I'm writing this down right now. I didn't know that. And everybody else should. Abraham and the slaves By the way, John Henry Clark was not opposed to Hannibal having alliances and coalitions. That's what his army was. So he didn't take the position that they were all alone. Ogawa said blacks had the opportunity to snatch power during this election, and we didn't show up. A lot of us did, but some of us didn't. James Pooh, beauty your goal, truth your plan, power your tools, skills. This agenda can be fueled by either love, alignment with nature, or hate. Opposition to nature. Trump is fueled by hate. That's very beautiful, brother. James Pooh. Hecka, need we be wary of alliances and coalitions as history is replete with such treachery. Yeah, but also victories. Imhotep Akabulan, I just emailed you an email with an article by Greg Palast regarding voter suppression. Yeah, and I think if you counted it up, who knows, that might have made the difference in the election itself. Hecka, I think he's referring to Biden. If he was serious about alleviating poverty, he would have stopped the war. Yeah, well, he should have stopped it. That's for sure. Peggy Parks Miller, everyone does what they do best, so we all can have success. That's true. Kurt, thank you. Hecka, African Americans, why didn't you pressure Biden while he was in office? That's true. Big fat mistake. Herman Hall, how many immigrants should come in the country per year? Okay. Hey, Lawrence, watching from Taiwan. Right on. B. Stokes, a whole cabinet of incompetent sycophants just there to spread white supremacy and fealty to Trump. Yeah, and a lot more, implementing their agenda. Imhotep is saying that the Secretary of Defense was approved last night by the VP breaking the 50-50 tie. Well, Dan, he goes, Lawrence Freelo, he's been sharing the platform with other social media. Thank you. Curtis Thomas, Trump is making a move on FEMA as a test for mass privatization. Oh, that's a good point. Very good point. Yeah, B. Stokes, don't let the wrong people in on your stuff. Yeah. Heck of good points here about Project 2025 hasn't really taken into account the decline of the empire. Yeah, they certainly haven't put forward programs designed to reverse it, if there are any. Yeah, Peggy Parks Miller, MAGA wants to put blacks back to the pre-Dred Scott era, where we had no rights and women didn't either. True. Points being made here by Peggy Parks Miller. Target has caved in and will stop their DEI program. Yeah, well, we do a lot of business with Target. We can reverse that one. People are saying, yeah, boycott's good. Boycott and buy black. Yeah, very good point. Peggy Parks Miller, my family is boycotting Walmart and most of the names on the list of places like McDonald's who stopped their DEI last month. Yeah, very good. Thanks, Hecka. Imhotep, can we get a copy of the pictures? Yeah, I'll find a way to have them email it to you. These two pictures. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, the power elite. The Germans, Ogawa says that the Germans have been laughing at the controversy over whether that was a Nazi salute. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hecka said, Marcus Garvey said, you all stay static until y'all's back against the wall. Peggy Parks Miller says she's committing to $10. That's appreciated. You can do that by just sending it to this donate information on Cash App, Dollar Pan African Publishers there. Thank you. Yeah, the Negro Mood book is out of print, so you have to get it on the used book market. And a few people have that I recommended it to. Kurt Thomas, the Garvey pardon by Biden was nice. Yeah. Yes. Black Power USA is good, but it's not his best book, but it's good. Thank you, Teresa. Do I think the LGBTQ nonsense is a direct attack on the Black family? If a person is born wired a certain way and they're attracted to us the same sex, I don't put that down. But if it's a campaign to just say that, people should be recruited to do this or something else, nah, you know what I mean? So, yeah. Hecka makes a point. Many of the people who say Democrats did nothing, I think, feel they have not benefited in any way from their term in office. Yeah, to an extent, because the infrastructure plans, the reindustrialization, chips, all of these environmental stuff, these take time to take effect. There's 17 million jobs coming out of this. So this takes time. You don't take long-term programs and they all produce benefits overnight. But yes, there has been benefits. The unemployment rate of blacks is at the lowest level in 30 or 40 years, 5%. And ours is usually 10, it's usually double what the white unemployment rate is. And that's because of the programs put together by that administration and the fact that some of them were targeted for Black communities. So some of us don't know when we got something where it came from, but a lot of people have not seen the benefits yet. And whether they do will depend on how much these programs stand up against Trump's attack. Okay, Commissar says ostriches don't bury their hand. I never said in danger now. I just said they bury their heads. So you're explaining when they're seeking food in the ground and burying their eggs. I didn't mean to imply that either. Ostriches are fast and strong as horses. They can fight and escape predators. Okay. King Cam's and Jumbe podcast. My apologies for not attending regularly. Classes at the high school have begun. Peace, family. Well, we're glad to have you. Imhotep Alkabulan says Greg Palace said that there was a difference of 4 million votes suppressed in one form or another. Well, then that determined the outcome of the election. But again, the organizers of this campaign knew that. They knew they were up against voter suppression. And so they knew the only way they could win is to win big. That was Obama's philosophy, and he was right on that. And so it was the failure of their programs that they put forward that didn't give people the incentive to come out in the numbers that could overcome that. But that's an important point you're making. That's a huge number of votes suppressed. And the Democrats were weak in responding while it was going on. Oh, that's a good point. Robert Belcher. Do you think Nigeria got the memo that they have been selected out as a country that will not automatically get visas? No, and that's real stupid on America's part, given how strategic Nigeria is when it comes to power, economic power, and the potential for future power. And Bowles, I was in Honolulu during election. The line that I saw with only 3 hours left before closing could not have reached its end with every vote placed. Only 2 places to vote on the island, and one closed by 4 p.m., forcing all to get themselves to downtown polls. That's ridiculous. And the Democrats shouldn't have allowed that to happen. Robert Belcher, 5 African nations selected to be excluded from automatic visas to this country as a result of Trump's executive decision. All skin folks are not kin folks. You got that right. And we're going to see more of that play out. Suppression does not explain the 2% Trump battleground surge. The victories of both Trump and statewide Democrats, or the fact that Trump is bragging about Elon's knowledge of vote counting machines. Yeah, and the ability to buy votes, which is what he also did in the swing states. Okay, Brother Ogawa will send Brother Imhotep the pictures via Facebook. So, Brother Imhotep, if you're still on, you should send your email right now through the chat, and then Ogawa can send those pictures to you, you know. And Ogawa, do me a favor and send me those also via my email, because I have the pictures that I use, but yours is an improvement for, the internet. Ann Bowles, how much investigation was conducted without sounding like echo of Trump's loss to Biden 4 years ago? A lot. A lot. In fact, it's just pretty much there. And it's pretty clear that Trump's mismanagement of COVID was a key reason for his loss, a key reason. And a huge extra vote that turned out, 5 million, all of which were not going to turn out in this election no matter what. Or if it did, it means that the Harris campaign had to go and get a lot of people that hadn't voted. Ed Donaldson, please Google search Harry Jones, Assistant Director, African American Civil War Museum, 2-part C-SPAN series. I've seen those. Those are excellent. Too bad the guy's not still alive, a Marine captain. Been in the Marines over 20 years and you're only a captain. That's because you were woke. That was a beautiful brother. By the way, I like all these comments that have come in here, you know? Nice. Jimmy from Bristol. Bristol, United Kingdom. Greetings, Elder. Can you suggest some national or international organizations that potential activists could join today? Well, I would say in the UK, you should join Pan-African Congress Movement. And they do some good work around African Liberation Day and other things, Kwanzaa, whatnot. But I've been working with them since 1974, Pan-African Congress Movement, PACM. Okay, Imhotep is listed his email address right there, which means he's hung in for this whole time. Imhotep, that's quite an achievement, as busy as you are. Heck, an ostrich is good eating meat, I heard, though I'm a vegan. That's a funny one. Okay. Kamazar, I think he's referring to Elon Musk's salute. He said the salute was used between 1934, 1935, and 1942. Yeah. And that's consistent with him lining up with the right wing throughout Europe, including Germany. So, yeah, and he's not a disabled force. That's a force there. Okay, I know that this was not like the rah-rah speech that people like to hear. The truth is what it is. What you gonna do with it, folks? And I, like my best friend Kayindi Solowazi says, I bet on Black people. We're smart. We also like each other, most of us. Smarter than anybody else, almost, other than maybe Native Americans. Kamazar, Western systems are experts at propaganda, marketing, and sales. How else could Europe, with 1,000 years head start of Christianity and various exposures, theologians, and philosophies, practice poorly? Well, actually, because that's their culture, and especially Jesus Christ Christianity, that's going contrary to the culture. Turn the other cheek, forgive your enemies. Are you kidding? Arianism is based on cruelty, not kindness. You know what I mean? And white people take it and they use it. It's usually Old Testament stuff. And then they use the New Testament on us. Turn the other cheek, forgive your enemy because they don't know what you're doing. As Malcolm said, they've been doing it so long, they're experts at it. How can you say they don't know what they're doing? And forgiveness is the best thing all the time. I get that, in that carrying grudges around, hatred around, that's Trump. That will eat you up. But I don't forget. And I believe in justice, not, as Rap Brown said, just iced. And he should have been released on those pardons. That brother has a growth on his face and everything else. And it's really good that they released the Native American activist who was unjustly imprisoned, but he should have been released as well. But, they are using Christianity in a way that serves them, and they're very good, as Marimba Ani pointed out in her book, Yurugu, in turning that little story around to get us to be submissive. Not all of us are. My view on the Black church, it's more complicated than that. But to the extent that you buy that, oh no. I like to rest my brain in the evening. I watch some media because I'm doing work all day. And it's so hard to find a good movie because it was almost all revenge or serial killers or something like that, or drug dealers. That's the limit of it. But the white movies, the theme is so-and-so's wife was killed, so-and-so's son was killed, so-and-so. There's one series that's been on for 5 different series where the organized crime killed the guy's dog, and he went out and he's had at least 4 series or 5 series on this, killing all of them, which couldn't happen. One person against organized crime. I'm sorry, you're finished. But revenge, payback. I don't have that. I don't have the need of revenge, but I believe in justice. You do something wrong, you got to pay for it. I don't believe in those reconciliation commissions they did in South Africa. White people get up there and just confess and get off. If you killed somebody, I'm against capital punishment. If they kill somebody, you should be capital punished. If that's what the law is, you should get what you gave. And I'm telling you, when you go upstairs, that's what happens. God is the kindest, lovingest entity going. but there is a place called hell. And some Negroes are more forgiving than God. God don't forgive wrongdoing. You know what I mean? Yeah, John Wick. Yeah. Okay, Commissar. Thank you, Gloria Briscoe. And I really enjoy having you because you one sharp sister and we having you on the show, share some of your stuff. Commissar, was continuous wars and oppression the best they could do domestically and abroad? Yeah, good question. That seems to be what they really love, Who else? What president said, God bless the troops? But Biden. I said, oh, give me a break. Okay, that was it. We got our work cut out for us, and I think we're up to the task. We have a lot of things that we got to correct. We don't have a single national organization that has got the stuff. We don't have it. We need to build one. Black Lives Matter did their thing. They had their weaknesses and strengths. They helped bring Trump down. That group would appear to be gone. They're broken into parts. If they come back, it'll be interesting to see. But as one of the young people that have watched this show that I was working with for a while said, even with these groups that are centered on group-centered leadership, we also need organizations that have more structure. And this is coming from a younger person. And I said, yeah, because without the structure of a national organization, which in this case was CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, I wouldn't have been able to do the work I did because, we could draw from an organization. We could bring people into a structure and it was nationwide. So that's something we've got to do, and but learn from the past. Learn from the past. It's got to really build power, and the ego's got to go out of it. The best organizing, you base it on humility, and I mean humility towards our own people. You don't know everything. You don't know everything. I don't. You don't. Yeah, Leonard Peltier, the brother that was just released, who was innocent, and it took the last reprieve that Biden gave, but he included him, so that was good, So, okay, I love you all. This is done for love, nothing else, And Ogawa, send me those pictures, all of them, by way of my email. And I'll talk to you about other ways I can get it too. Really appreciate it. But I appreciate all of you. And you see, I'm back. These shows try to be topical and situational. This stuff is important now. And I know our best shows generate from African history, and we'll continue to do that. But the purpose of African and African-American history and culture and politics and everything else is to be able to use it to change your circumstances now, to empower you now. So that's the point now. The deeper that well you can draw from, the more you have to offer, and we got a lot to offer. So thank you, and Hotep, until next week.